on. The ask that Susquehanna Valley EMS was making to the community is that quite frankly, the state's not going to step up, and somebody needs to step up and start making the industry whole. And so the discussion at the local level that we were having in Reevestown EMS, Susquehanna Valley EMS was rolling out countywide. And like myself as a supervisor for East Hempfield, Susquehanna Valley EMS is my EMS provider. And their center of mass is East Hempfield Township. So we don't see the missed calls from the shortages because it's the periphery municipalities around East Hempfield that are having the issues first because they take care of their own area first. And LGH is right there, so of course they don't want to give up East Hempfield and lose LGH. So their service is excellent in East Hempfield Township, but you get to Manor Township and you start getting the ring around East Hempfield, they're having difficulty making calls with paid staff. So the industry needs to pay these guys more for what they're seeing and doing. The industry's not getting full reimbursement with what they need at this point from the insurance companies. The volunteerism is dropped through the floor. Reevestown still does have some volunteers. Susquehanna Valley EMS still has volunteers. So it's not like everybody just said, poo-poo on the volunteer concept. But for the most part, the industry is on the paid drivers. So they were making the ask, just presenting what the problem is. Susquehanna Valley EMS laid out all their numbers in really great detail. And all their calls and everything, just kind of, they basically open booked all their information to the community, which was really impressive. It was good for Rick Carpenter to see that, because I said that's what we kind of like in the township too. What you see Susquehanna Valley EMS doing right now is the kind of information we're going to need in this community. So that was the discussion. That's not news to you, but what's occurring in Reevestown and occurring with Wellspan is occurring countywide. It's not, the EMS companies are all going to be coming back now to the municipalities, especially the ones with paid drivers, and making asks for additional money. And it comes down to, we had a discussion about this in East Hempfield the other night. Yeah, a lady in the audience, he was there for a different reason, and I won't go into detail why she was there. But it turns out her daughter has a lot of EMS calls, and it goes up to Hershey Medical. And she had one perspective of the board, and she had a totally different perspective after we got to talk about EMS. When you talk about funding fire, and we've talked about fire for a number of years, but we've really not talked about EMS much until the last couple of months. Fire is important, and I'm looking at Chad because he's here in the background. It's extremely important, and this is not to talk about funding fire or not funding fire at this point, because I think fire should be properly funded. But what this is to talk about is when you start talking about EMS and you talk about missed call for EMS, that's not the same thing as a missed call for an accident or even a fire. When you're talking about a missed call and you're having a cardiac arrest or something like that that's going on, you have a problem. And that's what Susquehanna Valley EMS was raising the red flag on at this point, is that we're getting to the point where we're going to start truly having missed calls for critical cases, ALS level cases occurring in the county. Or where the call comes when the ambulance finally does respond, is no longer responding to life support, it's now for care, because they're taking the body back to the hospital. So that's the point to make at this point. All of the services have been, have issues. I think this has in the past been focusing more on police and fire, and EMS now needs to be part of the discussion because it's now getting critical, and it's actually getting to the point with EMS also starting to leapfrog the other two, because now all of a sudden when you start talking about missed calls for EMS, that actually starts finally getting people's attention. The whole public sector, public services safety issue needs to be addressed top to bottom from police, fire, and medical. And EMS is finally the one that's starting to get people's attention. LMP's writing articles about it because now it's starting to get close to home. Everything else was more abstract at this point. Now when you talk missed ambulance calls, you start talking real world at this point.
Well, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but you you touched on something there. I think so many times boards, or this board, or any board would, if we could somehow combine those fire and EMS together, even though maybe Stevens doesn't have an EMS, but Reamstown covers them, as does Reinhold's, as does everybody else. You get the stigma away from, well, you're just doing this for that, you know, it's a safety thing. It's not, they're all safety related. I mean, people can expire in a fire when there's a missed call too. And thank God that has very, very rarely happened around here, but it can happen. And I understand that the importance of an EMS call, but they're all with one day. You're right, you can't put a, this is 1 star, this is 2 stars, this is 3 stars. They're all 3 stars, they're all 5 stars, they're all ones as important as the other. And no one, me included, likes to talk about fees or taxes or something else, but the money does run out. You know, and there's got to be a creative way, and I guess the creative way is a fee too. And we talked about it years ago when I'm going way, way back. We had a guy who was in the fire company who used to sit on the board of supervisors. Won't mention his name, but and I talked with Harvey about a fire tax, and no, you don't want that. You know, well, here we are, fellas. You know, you're gonna have to do something because there's none of us. Effort Township, Effort Borough, you name them. There's nobody has a whole excess of money that we should use to support these organizations. You just don't have it. We don't have it. Everything is spoken for. Our budgets are balanced. As not like the state or not like the feds, all they do is go out and create more money. We don't have a printing press. We can't make money. We don't spend any more than what we take in. You're gonna have to face facts. We're gonna have to face facts. It's a long, hard, and I'm talking to the choir, I know that, but it's just.
Well, I just want to go on the record, this is a total funding situation.
Yeah, it's total.
We have to look at fire the same way we look at police, the same way we look at EMS. Everybody, and we got to look at different degrees of issues. Right now, the area that's bleeding the worst is our EMS. That's not to say that fire's having any easier time with fundraising or bringing money in at this point. And they're, year to year, it's going to get more and more difficult. And we have to make sure that the fire companies are adequately funded.
Well, it comes down to the catalyst, and what I said yesterday, the catalyst is EMS. That's the one that's most critical right now because they're hemorrhaging, literally.
So, I'm glad you brought that up, Doug, because this is what the working group is going to suggest. The working group, one, would like to meet with Denver Borough, and last night I talked to Mike Hession, and he agreed to meet. He was actually wondering why it took so long for the township to reach out to us. So, we're reaching out to him to meet, because I told him it was going to be coming back asking for Denver Borough to contribute to EMS. And so there will be a borough council member and Mike Hession joining the EMS working group to talk about Denver Borough covering they're about a third, roughly 76% of the calls are in East Cocalico and Denver Borough calls. And the rest of them are mutual aid calls into the township. We're not interested in collecting or fees for mutual aid because, quite frankly, we provide mutual aid out of the township, they provide mutual aid into the township. Realistically, that becomes a wash. But what it does show is the first call is for Reamstown is Denver Borough and East Cocalico Township. And there's a little bit of Reinhold's into Denver Borough, and we have a little bit after the township. But primarily the first call area for Reamstown is Denver Borough and East Cocalico Township. So any solution to fix Reamstown EMS needs to be a Denver Borough, East Cocalico Township solution, not just an East Cocalico Township solution. Mike initially seems on board to having that discussion, and evidently he's already been talking to his council members without knowing that at some point he felt East Cocalico Township was going to come to them to talk about EMS. the discussions that occurred with the rest of the subsequent about EMS presentation were on how to fund. And one thing that came out that was interesting, again, this would require Denver Borough's participation, and is, as I became aware, I asked one of the lawyers that were there, that was part of the presentation, you know, for fire and police, when there was a missed call, a false alarm, most municipalities nowadays fund. Some do it gradually, some give a first pass or leave, whatever, but they want to in particular address the repeat offenders. 27% of all of Greenstone EMS's calls are for non-transport, i.e. a false alarm in a way. They get zero reimbursement dollars from Medicare, Medicaid, or insurance agencies. The city of Allentown fines for non-transport calls to EMS.
Can't do that.
You,
Car crashes are not, they don't go.
it's not, it's, the lawyer said that they have survived court challenge at this point, so we're looking at it.
So a passerby, let's say I'm involved in a vehicle accident, I get hit, and I'm a refusal, I refuse to go to the hospital. A passerby calls, doesn't know the situation, doesn't stop to check on anyone, but yet calls it in as a vehicle accident with entrapment, when in fact there is no entrapment. So a vehicle accident with entrapment would call for a ALS and a BLS. So you're sitting here telling me that you think that it would be a good idea to go after the person that refused to transport because someone else called it in and didn't know what they were doing?
We have not seen how Allentown wrote their laws, and you're giving one specific example. I'll give you 10 cases that occur, 100 cases that occur against your one specific.
By all means, I think we should be finding because
you have people that
are on Narcan.
You have people that do Narcan calls, you have people that call just because they need assistance walking down their steps. And you got 911 crews, EMS crews that are responding to help a person walk down the steps instead of them getting assistance themselves for that kind of stuff.
Can't Reevestown adopt a policy that they don't run non-emergency
You
calls?
cannot deny a call when a call gets made for EMS. EMS is your call of last resort for any type of assistance. You cannot deny, you cannot refuse a call. You cannot do it. And so the innovative way to do that is to looking at, fine, you can give a first time pass. So for your example, someone has that, there's means of having passes for reasonable reasons, or you might have a pass for the first initial one. But you have people that are calling 911 for EMS for daily helping them get out of bed.
I would say your chances of
And you know, when you
vehicle
call
accident being misclassified, and I'm sure we can actually, I'm sure Chief Kevin could probably look up numbers of crashes that were actually called with injuries that turned out not to have injuries.
Now, what, Chance, what
Yeah, but they're non-refusals, so
They're considered a refusal, so that would be in that 27% that you're talking about.
Let me give you an example. In the April 1st meeting that we had at the hospital, where they had their expert come in, Bob Holdsworth, and he had an extensive conversation about this. He said one of the #1 problems they're finding in the industry across the board is, it's called treat, no transport. So it is, he used an example of, they have an individual who calls EMS, they fall out of their wheelchair, the family calls EMS, and he said they have situations where they show up at that house 3, 4, 5 times a week. And they just wanted help getting back into the wheelchair because family members didn't want to do it.
And I'm sure that there are extreme cases like that, but to the fact that 27% of Reevestown's calls are not going to be that situation. There's a better chance of you having a situation of a vehicle accident being misclassified than you do of that.
So let me push back a little bit on you. So of the 20%, 27% that we're being told are non-transport, what percentage of the 27% are your situation?
I don't
at that
know.
call?
Do you know?
No, we don't.
But
So why can't we figure that out?
But the thing is, this is going to be a common sense approach. when I was on patrol, I was in Rose Hill Development and an alarm came in and I was literally right in front of the house and it was just the wind blew the door open. The homeowner didn't have the opportunity to talk to the alarm company to say it was a false alarm, that she just left and didn't close the door properly and give the proper passcode. She was basically freaking out that she was gonna get charged $100 and couldn't afford it. And I told her, this is a common sense approach. I'm not forwarding this information to the zoning officer in this case because it was a specific case. If it's a crash, Reamstown isn't going to pursue anything with somebody that didn't get transported from that crash. I mean, that's not, I don't think, what we're talking about. What they're talking about is, and our officers could tell you the places that in the past have called, I mean, I can think of one in Denver where we were there every 5 days, and I finally told my officers, do not respond to that. We are not there to help people who need medical assistance in some way, shape, or form to pick them up when they fall 3, 4, 5 times a week. That's, I think, where they're directing things at.
And I think, Chance, you're going to be surprised once we run numbers about, which we would do. We're not just going to impose this arbitrarily. It's going to be a long discussion, and we're going to look at what Allentown's doing. But to treat non-transport calls, where people are using that as a way of getting around going to the doctor or getting other type of assistance, there's an expense. That's a $600 expense when that rig shows up to help a person get into their ambulance. That's a real number. And it's not the most efficient way to do business. And we've got people that are gaming the system. And the system needs to be repaired. This is just one tool among many. But if you don't address it, we just go purely to revenue, and we don't address the cost drivers too. And that's what the fine program is, not to come down hard on people. The fine program is to come down to stop the person from calling 4 or 5 times a week and saying they want help out of bed. We need that kind of help. Then you need to get a nurse assistant in there and help that person help you with your daily duties. It shouldn't be somebody, an EMS person, helping you brush your teeth in the morning.
Well, I'm sure that there are calls that are like that every EMS agency runs. To the point, I don't think it's 27% of a call volume of Reamstown ambulance. I don't think that. I mean, I could be wrong with that. I am curious to actually see what the numbers would show.
So are we. That's why.
I mean, we've been having this discussion for 2 years and we still don't have basic numbers like that. That to me is a basic number of how many times your ambulance gets called and then the service is refused. Why don't we further, go in detail and say, why was it refused? Was it called in the wrong way? Was it someone that just, needs help getting up? We should have that thing, we should have something like that classified, or somebody from the ambulance should have some kind of information like that to give to, the supervisors so they can make decisions more educated on specifics relating to the problem we have at hand.
We agree. I mean, it's not, this is just an idea that's just getting floated out. The board's not taking action to
No, I understand that, but we've had this problem for years.
We have never at this point talked about this concept. This is the first time this concept is being floated out. Of course, the board is going to have to seek more information as to what types of calls are, how would that apply. I'd like to see how Allentown's imposing it. I'd like to see how because they have survived, according to the lawyer, they have survived court challenge. That's what you need to know. That means they have a good plan. How's their plan being implemented? How are they collecting fees? What do the fees look like? Do they have a first pass? Do they have multiple passes before they start charging a fee? Is it a graduated scale? There's lots of questions to be asked. Are there exceptions? I'm sure they got exceptions built into their plan, otherwise they would not have survived the court challenge.
And let's be very frank about this. No one else in Lancaster County has done this or is addressing the issue. We as East Cocalico, we're actually spearheading and tackling this head on right now. Everybody else is just pushing it down the road and ignoring it. So there's going to be a large learning curve here, and there's a lot, you're correct, there's a lot of data we got to gather, and we got to really think about how to do this. Because no one else has done this. But it's coming.
And, you know, as you just pointed out, Chancellor, I don't disagree with you at all. We have some of that data, we just haven't broken it down. And I say we have it, I don't have it, Alan doesn't have it, Romeo doesn't have it. The ambulance, Rick and those guys would have it. But I don't think anybody ever went to Rick and said, hey, you got called to Doug Mackley's house and he didn't want to go. What was the reason? I don't think that, I think that's where the breakdown occurred. You know, it's just a number on a piece of paper because nothing was tracked. We could probably go back to Rick over the last, I'm going to say, I want to say 6 months, but a certain time period and say, hey, of your last 20 calls that didn't go, can you tell me why they didn't go? Or 50 or whatever. I mean, you're not going to go back 10 years. That would be impossible.
I mean,
But it would be a start to narrow down, is that number 27%? Is that a real number? Or is it 12%? Or is it 10? Or is it 35%? You know, but that's probably where this group needs to start with Rick and say, Rick, of all your calls that you got since the beginning of the year, how many didn't you transport? Because you wrote that down somewhere. Next question, if you did, why didn't you? I need a reason. If you can remember why, let me know. And then we can go start that process of charting, and from now on, Rick, this is what we expect you to do.
And I think that would be a good thing for the working group.
And I'm
to ask
picking on
the
Rick, I
ambulance
don't mean just Rick, but he's the guy that's
Yeah,
been there
just-
forever, you know.
And I think that's a good thing that the township should ask the ambulance. company.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, because it's gonna substantiate that 27%. We don't know. That's an industry-wide thing right now. Industry-wide in the area that we're now talking about certainly isn't United States-wide, because I'm assuming that places like Allentown or somewhere else is gonna have, that number's gonna be higher.
It's gonna be.
Because of the
it's gonna be a
demographics
lot
of who's
higher,
there.
Because you're a totally different demographic in Allentown.
Right,
And
exactly.
same with a lot of other areas throughout the state. I mean, it's great that we're talking to people that are heavily involved at the state level in this, or, you know, at a regional level, but our area is unique
Right.
compared to a lot of other areas.
Correct, it is.
And
I agree with
I
that.
think we should take what others have to say into consideration, but I don't think we should be judging our own decisions on what, you know, a big
Right.
shot of Wellspan
And
says, or what Allentown does, or anything like that.
I don't think, I know this group that has been formed won't do that. You know, because we're involved and we're helping to pay the bill, so we're gonna have more skin in the game, so to speak. We're probably gonna be asking them a lot harder questions, and one of them would be for Scott and RC to get in there and say to Rick, hey, can you document why, of all the guys you didn't, all the people you didn't transport, why you didn't? What was the reason? And if there's an ever increasing thing there, or they fell out of the chair, or, you know, they couldn't get out of bed, or whatever, you start tracking things, and you start, it's not just, well, we ran the call today. I mean, you guys are on fire, you report everything. You're used to it. They're not used to it.
That's
Now
what I'm saying.
we gotta make them get used to it. We
No,
gotta
they-
make them
they-
get
But
used to it.
to be honest with you, we don't know what they track. And
I
so
know that.
They might have a lot more detail than what we know.
Absolutely, they might, and they might not, but if they don't, then we need to make them track that stuff.
I mean, the thing, Chance, is we have to, this is the initial discussion at this
Right,
point.
yeah,
We
yeah,
actually
I know.
got some more, we actually have a lot more working group recommendations to make that came out of yesterday's meeting. This was just one of the things we wanted to look at this
Right.
point. And I think for us to look at EMS, we have to look at it from how it operates, what its cost drivers are, and how it's funded. You gotta look at all three of those aspects to make EMS as efficient as possible. I will push back on Wellspan. Wellspan's local. That's not, Wellspan.
Wellspan's a big corporation.
Wellspan's a big corporation, but Wellspan after the hospital is local, and that's where this issue is. They do not provide ALS transport throughout all of Wellspan.
No,
That's
but
why
they have
we're-
chase units throughout all of Wellspan, because some of the medic units that they run now at Ephrata came from York.
They are gotten rid of ambulance service in most of the other facilities. They are keeping ambulance service on here in Effort.
But
So
they
they
don't have ambulance service, they have medic service.
They,
There is a difference.
this is ALS, this is the full-blown process they got here. It's not.
So for instance, WellSpan can run their chase car and bill the same, if not more, that the ambulance can bill, and they don't have to transport, yet the ambulance does all the work. That's why WellSpan doesn't want to get out of it.
WellSpan is losing money. I mean, I don't know how else to put it bluntly at this point. Well, this is not a money maker. It does make sure that they get the patients coming to their hospital where they actually do make their money. So I'm not naive about that part of the process, because if it's LEMSA, they'd be going to LGH.
They're losing money to the tune of well over $500,000.
But do you remember the other week, or the last meeting, you said about numbers and how we're going into a big project and it looks like we're losing a lot of money, but we're really not? How do you know that they're not using that same principle or that same practice? I'm not sitting here disputing because I didn't see the numbers, but I'm just asking. I mean, it was brought up that we're losing money, but we had this money and we knew that this was going out, so I don't.
The data that was presented was that they were losing well over $500,000, and there's a directive from the executive level that they need to address that loss. That's how serious that loss is.
Okay.
When your
So
boss,
Alfred Hospital's
when-
losing $500,000 with their medics.
when your boss is telling you you're losing over $500,000, you need to look at it immediately as to how you're going to handle it. Do you ask your boss, I don't agree with the number, you're lying, it's not true, I'm going to ignore it? You got to go with the directive. And that is the data they gave us.
WellSpan's on the record. I'm not going to dispute whether WellSpan's telling the truth or not. They're on the record saying that they're bleeding $500,000 a year. And I'm going to take them at face value that they're bleeding that kind of money. And based off what I know, all the other ambulance companies are saying throughout the whole state, not just Lancaster County, everybody's bleeding money to different amounts. But everybody's bleeding money except for the pure volunteer-based EMSs. The only ones that are in the black right now, like 5 Pointville, would be one example. But they are becoming rare and stuff. You count on one hand now how many are 100% volunteer based with no paid, and even 5 Pointville as a part-time paid employee now, that are there. That is not the norm anymore. New Holland is another one that's bucked the trend. There's not many left in the county at this point. You can count, it is down to less than 5 on your hand. You can count in the whole county. They're able to make volunteer work on EMS.
Chance, let me give you the data. And you gotta decide whether their data is accurate or not. And you
Well,
can
yeah,
ask.
I mean,
November 5th, 2018, the EMS services meeting we had at WellSpan.
okay.
ALS loses $600,000 a year. Ephrata Hospital directive, they've hit a turning point, they need to address it immediately. That's my notes. If you think that's incorrect, feel free to ask them. I don't know how else to say it.
And I don't know if I can ask that since they're a private entity.
But we have to go with the data we've been given. And that's the severity of where ALS is, and that's the severity where EMS is.
And then I heard also, Scott, you were saying that EMTs are roughly $14 an hour and medics are roughly $18 an hour. So again, I'm going to bring this question up that I brought up prior at another meeting. Then if there's only a $4 an hour difference in your salary, wouldn't it make more sense to run a BLS unit as an ALS unit and bill for the higher service?
I don't think you can do that. You can't bill ALS for PLS service.
I'll answer that one for
Okay.
you, because I've actually, if Reevestown was to put an ALS provider in there, they cut off everything on this side of the county, because they are now the ALS providers at the hospital.
But if they make a BLS transport, even though there's an ALS paramedic on it.
They can have them on there, but they
They
can't
only
classify.
charge the BLS charge. I have experience in that. They don't, you can't put an ALS provider on there and then charge ALS when it's just a BLS transport.
But what happens when you go out towards like Lancaster City and
That's
Susquehanna Valley? They run their ambulances as an ALS unit.
They run ALS, BLS transport.
And
The
if
fact-
it's a BLS
the
transport.
misconception I had, to be honest with you, was if Reevestown did ALS, BLS, and transport, that they would be whole. That's a misconception. I'll be the first to admit I was wrong by thinking that. WellSpan has documented, and Susquehanna Valley EMS has documented, even when you do the total package, you're losing money now at this point. The numbers don't work across the board. You can't make it just doing transport, you can't make it doing BLS, you can't make it doing ALS, and and you can't make it doing all three. The numbers don't work across the board in all three areas.
See, and let's take a step back and look at it from a larger picture, right? The discussions we're having right now, they're excellent. They're excellent questions. Listen to the dialogue. But what's interesting about it is if you take a look at it from a large perspective, it's a really complex issue.
It is.
You know? And the discussion we're having here amongst each other, it shows you just how complex this thing is, right? So what we're doing right now is with the working group, we're just trying to take a first stab at it in terms of what do we do next? Because a lot of people are just frankly ignoring it and letting it go down the road. You know, at least what we're doing as East Cocalico is the right thing. It may not be an easy thing to do, but we're trying to look at it now.
And I think it's a great thing to do.
We're looking at all three things. We're not looking at just revenue to EMS.
No.
We're looking at cost control, which is where the funding does come in. We're looking at process. We're not giving Reamstown EMS a pass on how they operate. Everything, all three things are being looked at this point by the working group. It's not just a money grab at this point. The other two aspects are being looked at because the other two aspects also drive cost inefficiencies, which have to be looked at.
And the third thing, which wasn't even talked about, it was briefly talked about. Let me just make a comment here. Young lady here, do you know what the difference between do you know what ALS and BLS is?
I actually don't know.
Okay, I figured, I didn't mean to be smart, but we're throwing these acronyms around because we know what it is. So it's basic life service or advanced life support, okay?
So you're having a heart attack, that's ALS. You have a broken leg and you don't need to have the sirens on to go to the hospital, that's BLS.
Right.
And you're an elderly person and you're being transported from Ephrata Hospital to Hershey Medical, that's transport.
And just like that, I lost my train of thought.
And when you're forgetful, that's a non-transport call.
I really did, I just lost it, man.
I don't call me.
I mean,
He's on.
oh, what?
One thing I would like you guys to think about, maybe ask Reamstown, is they have a very substantial reporting base for the ambulance. The fire's only catching up to what they got. That is public knowledge. You should be able to request their breakdowns of their calls,
Right.
and they should be able to print that out in 10 minutes.
Okay.
And maybe it's something to talk to your working group about and bring it back to an open meeting and present it on the screen to see what that is in reality. Because we're all sitting there playing the what-if game.
Yeah.
We don't
And
actually
I'm
know what
not trying
numbers
to
are.
make it sound like.
No.
You're fine.
These are just questions that.
You're asking questions, Chance, of things that we're asking as a working group, so you're not off base. I want to make a press to you that we're not sitting back and asking these questions. This is the first time this concept has come up, and we've already talked to Rick Carpenter that the way Susquehanna Valley EMS present their information publicly is the way we want Reamstown EMS present
They
their
probably
public.
gave you
All the way
that
down to the cost for a rig to respond to a call.
Right.
I want, just like we got the cost per officer figured out in the township, I want to know what the cost per call is every time there's a response, which it does play into that. Susquehanna Valley EMS has a number that's built into that cost per call, what the non-transport costs cost them. So
Do you remember what that was?
About $125 per call is related to the overhead of non-transport calls being mixed in with that. So it was like 400 something for a call for the base, then you have the non-transport, then you have the under reimbursement, and then you have the no insurance. And when you get that number, you start getting up at the $600 range for the total cost every time a call is being made for someone who's actually paying. And then you get undercut by the insurance companies at that point with not getting full reimbursement, which is why you come up with the shortfall in the first place.
And I just remembered what my fleeting thought was. We talked about it briefly, and I mentioned it to Senator Ahmed about they've got to do something to the state, and on his list of things to do, it's way down there. But the reimbursement rate is terrible. I mean, it's like $600 actual cost, and the state allows the insurance company to only send out less than half of that. It's like $280. So someone's eating that difference, $320. Well, guess who that is? We're all sitting in this room. We're it.
Yep.
We're eating it. Because the state in its infinite wisdom, the Commonwealth, not the state, hasn't adjusted that reimbursement rate for years and years and years. And we just had a meeting with Senator Ahmed a month ago. Every supervisor was invited in the county to meet with him for a breakfast meeting. And I cornered him after the meeting. I said, you gotta do something about this. We're all bleeding to death.
We are.
Not just east, not just west, everybody.
And
Across the state is bleeding to death because of this reimbursement rate.
I think the insurance companies are honestly getting away with
Sure
murder
they are.
with what they're
Yeah,
doing.
right.
And now this brings me to my next question, which I don't even know if it's even remotely possible. But could since Wellspan's been involved in these discussions, could the ambulance bill Wellspan directly for the transport and then Wellspan somehow put it onto their hospital bill as a line item under medical expenses to try and get a better return on coverage from the insurance company?
I can't answer that. I would doubt it, but I can't answer.
Yeah, I don't.
Because they probably have like a set limit for EMS transport, but if being billed from an EMS transport agency, you have a good chance of that being, oh, we're only covering this much. But if it's buried on the hospital bill at the very end, 9 times out of 10, they're not gonna see it, they're just gonna pay it.
The insurance company has to reimburse the person.
But I mean, is that something that,
We could talk with them about it, be honest with you, Medicare and Medicaid have very prescribed things that they pay for. They scrutinize the bills that won't pass for them. And insurance companies love to have reasons to deny a bill outright. And when you put tax on something that's not part of what they've already agreed for, because every insurance company has negotiated preferred rates with the hospitals. And it's a very prescribed method, and that just gives an excuse for the bills to be kicked around. Now, the question would be, would they be paying it, and then that person be responsible to pick up the difference, realistically, is what we're talking about.
yeah.
And even then, I'm not sure that's 100% legal at this point. That's not that we can't look into it.
Yeah, but I didn't know. It's just-
I don't think you can, I think anything that does not get covered by insurance with how the medical laws are written, the ambulance eats it. It's not, they can't go after the person and say, well, the insurance company only paid me $250, the cost of the ride was actually $450, you owe me $200. Now, if there's a couple more things with the working group, so that was only the first item. That was discussed. The second thing that came out for the first time ever is Reamstown floated the idea of spinning Reamstown EMS off and becoming its own nonprofit. And so that will be part of the discussion now. And we kind of all think from a transparency perspective, that's important. Also with the finding and everything else, if that were to occur, it needs to be a separate entity. The third thing that came up, which would be the first discussion in the county, one of the first discussions in the state, would be to do an EMS tax once they become their own entity. And again, that would require their numbers to be fully disclosed and public at that point, just like anybody who does a fire tax. We thought about, and this would be a discussion with the 3 chiefs about doing a fire and EMS tax. At least Scott at the meeting felt a little uncomfortable about going down that road yet. I will leave that to be a discussion with the 3 chiefs at this point. So what he felt comfortable with supporting right now would be an EMS tax and rolling EMS out of his fire department.
So, EMS tax for areas that are not covered by the township EMS provider, where would the revenues from those
Well, like
residents go?
we
Would everything just go to Reamstown, or if you're covered by Reinhold's, would your tax allotment go to Reinhold's? Or would it go to Africa?
EMS tax would cover the municipality. You have first call, second call. So Reamstown covers outside of East Cocalico and Denver Borough. Reinhold's, 5 Pointville, effort cover into the township. They actually presented the information yesterday what the breakout is. We actually have a good breakout what the municipalities is. The second call coverage of who comes in and we go out is a wash. So West Cocalico would have to decide how they want to fund Reinhold. Effort would have to decide how they want to fund Ephrata. just like we decide how we want to fund Reamstown. You know, but the second call stuff, this would not be for second call stuff. This would be purely just East Cocalico Township and Denver Borough.
Right, so for
And the
full,
discussion.
so to Scott's point, for full disclosure in terms of what we got from the meeting yesterday, Denver Borough accounts, this is incidents by municipality. Denver Borough accounts for 19% of Reamstown responses. East Cocalico is 57% for a total of 76%. Okay? All of the remaining, let's call them peripheral municipalities, Adamstown, Brecknock, Clay, Ephrata Borough, Ephrata Township, West Cocalico, all of those account for 23% of their calls.
And they don't have a separate for the turnpike?
Turnpike is if it's in East Cocalico, it's East Cocalico.
Okay, I didn't know.
Depends on where it sits, yeah.
Because doesn't the turnpike pay for that? I know they pay fire.
Now,
So
EMS is now purely on insurances at this point.
Okay.
So
So I
again,
wasn't
you're-
sure if that had changed or not.
So again, if you round it off, you're roughly 23, you're at 23% for the surrounding areas, so 76% for Denver and East Cocalico itself.
Denver, and this would be kind of controversial to say, but Denver's even concerned if they were to go down this road, this would be something we'll talk about, they may make Denver Borough completely covered by Reamstown EMS. So they would have a primary call for that,
I think the primary provider. Oh, okay.
which would kind of make sense. There's a small portion of Denver Borough, the vast majority of Denver Borough is covered by Reamstown EMS.
Yeah.
When you get just above the turnpike, that little
Yeah.
portion is covered by
Yeah,
Rhineland.
the west end is Rhineland,
So, again, this is why Denver Borough's coming to the table. This would be looked at as the first call municipalities funding EMS, not East Cocalico Township addressing EMS. It'd be the first call. So, and Denver Borough's at least willing to have an initial discussion at this point. Although I'm saying that without Chris having had a formal discussion with his council.
He's nodding yes.
Yeah,
He's nodding yes,
Because-
thank you.
yeah, he's like, yeah,
What's our problem is everyone's problem too, when it comes to EMS. I mean, Reinhold is having, I'm sure, having similar problems to what Reamstown's having, and Five Pointville is probably having them as well. So if we do, let's say, enact a fire or EMS tax, would the township then designate ambulance 17-1 as the entire township unit? So if for instance, where I live, we're covered by Rhineland's, and we pay the membership per year, which if we, give $50 a year, whatever, per household, you get, if you ever need a ride, an ambulance ride, it's covered. And you wouldn't get a bill from the ambulance association. So would the township work at securing a run area within the entire township limits for the ambulance,
possibly.
if there's a fire?
That's part of the discussion. That's, like I said, that's what Denver Borough suggested last night, possibly to look at. Reynolds is a very tiny part of the borough. It's not,
Yeah,
it's not, but that
but
comes
it's a
back,
large, it's a large part of east and the west part.
so that comes back down to first calls, second calls, and those type of discussions, quite frankly, how Reynolds wants to fund himself going forward. Because quite frankly, we impose an EMS tax township-wide, subscriptions go away. People just won't pay it anymore for EMS, even if it's another EMS company that has a small portion of our township. They're not gonna pay a subscription when they're already paying a tax at this point.
No, I get that.
So, and that was Scott Aki's concerns on the fire tax part. So like I said, that's a whole separate discussion with the three chiefs when we float this whole idea. There's gonna be a whole discussion with the fire chiefs too. So that was what came out of the working group, was all that. So obviously there's a lot of work to be done, but Denver Borough is willing to at least start being involved with the discussion. And for the record, there's been actually no formal council discussion about this other than informal discussion. So Mike is speaking on behalf of Mike, not speaking on behalf of the whole Denver Borough Council right now.
Real quick, Alan. I just want to say, as a citizen, I'm glad you guys are looking at this. I use that ambulance quite frequently over the years, you can see the stuff I've done. And I would miss that service being as close as it is to my residence, so I am glad that we are looking at this.
And we're taking public safety seriously as a township.
Public safety, the whole
Yeah.
gamut.
I think that's great and commendable, you guys. Hats off to all of you.
Civics Plus website.
I'll let Lisa real quickly give an update, but there has been some correspondence back and forth with Civics Plus.
Yes, correspondence back and forth with Civic in the next week or two. We'll be having training with the website project. I am going to meet with the ECTA authority for the website and the police department, which they go through another link, so we'll try to put a link on our page again into the
So there's
police.
We're getting closer.
Yeah.
Ken's got his MS4 page pre-populated, they're bringing that stuff over, they're bringing the pool stuff over. We're probably about a week out from you guys being able to see something where you can actually see a model that won't be live to everybody, but it'll actually be more than just have a pretty picture you saw the first time. So it's taking a little bit longer than we were hoping. I did miss. It's a 2-week process, but the part I made the mistake on is when they would start the 2-week process.
It didn't say which 2 weeks.
Yeah, so it took a month before they started, and they did remind me that.
Good things take time, that's all I'll say.
What did we state?
And tomorrow, myself, Chris, and Lisa will be meeting with PSX. They're bringing their technician, and we will test all 300 cards that we're going to be issuing out. We have about 150 plus cards now to mail out to residents. They've been very understanding, although a couple now that have gotten back at February, March have called to find out what's going on.
Oh, yeah. My next door neighbor cornered me twice for
We made them aware that we had gotten wrong cards from the vendor, and that we would be, those first 50 that went out, we have a postage return and mailing envelope to go out to get the original card back. If a resident doesn't turn his original card back, as far as I'm concerned, we don't care. We're going to return whatever we get back to PSX, but their old card will not work at that point. We were kind of hoping to get the old cards out of circulation so people don't grab the wrong card when they go to the gate on a Saturday, and then one of us gets a phone call that the gate's not working. So we're trying to get as many of these old cards out of circulation as possible, but if all things go well tomorrow and I see the gate go up 300 times, for the cards that we got, then we will mail them out. But short of seeing the gate go up 300 times, we're not mailing these cards out until we get absolute assurances that they're going to work.
Let me be the naysayer, what, we should have said, we want green cards, and that'll mean it's go. And don't mind, just bring your green card along, don't keep the old, but don't even mail it back, just.
I can see the headline story.
I know.
East Cocalico Township issues green cards.
Green cards. I thought that, as soon as it said green cards.
ICE come and investigate.
Okay, moving on, mowing contract update.
Yeah, I have on the screen behind you, it's in your packet too, a quote from Vantage Mowers. Thank you, Chance, for introducing us to Vantage. They took over Chance's original contract for the remaining 2 years. Part of our discussion, though, was expanding. So this is a separate contract for Stony Point Park, Fishing Creek Park, and Lee Drive. The bidding threshold where we had to get competitive bids is 11,100. That would be, we'd have to get 3 quotes. We're under 3 quotes with the number we're at, so we don't have to get 3 quotes. I met with them, we had Chance's recommendation. I felt very comfortable with Vantage as the mower at this point. So I would like to move forward with that. Normally, as a manager, with being under 3 quotes and it's a budget item, I wouldn't even come before you. It would be, I would just email you guys, here's what we're doing, and I would sign the contract. However, I would like this to be, just like we did with Chance last year, a 3-year contract with 2-year options to renew. Vantage has agreed to freeze their rates for the first 3 years, and then we'll discuss an option 2 years, any increases in rates. That way we're not doing this year to year. We got this done. We're good for mowing with one contractor for the next couple of years. Eventually the contract he took over for Chance will come up first, and then a year later this one will come up again for having to get quotes again. But for right now, I'd like to just lock these guys under a 3-year. So if you agree with that, then the motion would be to authorize the manager to enter into an agreement with Vantage Property Solutions for a 3-year contract for an annual estimated fee of $10,875 as presented.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
I'll second Sam.
Any comments or questions?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you.
Chance, thanks for looking at it.
Yep.
Yeah, no problem. I wasn't gonna let you
They
guys
moved the
hang
pool
for.
area outside the gate.
Yeah, they were out here yesterday, they knew there was gonna be a meeting. Chance says you always get the miss of that just before the meeting.
The what?
They knew there was a meeting today, so like I said, as Chance knows, if it gets a little long, you make sure you hit the meeting area just before the meeting. So they were out here yesterday, they took care of the whole township building yesterday.
Okay,
We were getting long.
new business site survey approval for Rose Hill Basin proposal.
Yes, you have before you. You got the motion from back on that one. I'm gonna read the motion because this is pretty wordy, but this is for the Rose Hill Basin. Myself, Tony, Ken, and Brian have been involved. This is part of our pollution reduction plan. As we talked about in January, we have a problem with the Adamstown area sewer authority's pipe. One of their main sewer lines is being exposed. So this became a priority for the township. We've had back and forth dialogue with Adamstown about them doing the temporary fix and us doing the long-term fixes, which is retrofitting the basin. What you have before you is a motion to authorize the approval of site survey proposal of $3,500 for triple surveyors and the wetland delineation report preparation of $950 from Vortex Environmental as they relate to the Rose Hill Storm Basin Pollution Reduction Plan retrofit project in accordance with the proposed full correspondence obtained by Becker Engineering, conditioned upon the township first obtaining a signed letter of acknowledgement commitment to the property owner to the satisfaction of the township and township solicitor. So, well, that's for Vantage, this
I know.
whole agreement, so.
Yeah, there, that's.
Yeah, so this is there's the basin here,
Right.
Rose Hill. It was designed for all three phases. Obviously, they built the first phase. So you have a lot of extra capacity. It is our #1 pollution reduction plan project. On the books, this is going to be a $150,000 to $200,000 project. Once we get construction, realistically, we're talking in the tens of thousands as the design progresses. But this is the first step. We have to survey it and do the wetlands delineation, and then we can actually design the basin retrofit. More than likely, it's just going to be changing some orifices on the outlet structure so that it retains more water and possibly cleaning out some sediment that's built up in the basin over the last 10 years. That's going to be what the basin retrofit probably ultimately becomes. Plus, making a permanent restoration outside of the outfall that's washing away the Adamstown area pipe cover that is at the toe of the outfall pipe for the basin.
So the proposal is about $950 in Vortex and $3,500 in Trimble.
That's correct.
We'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion. Any comments or questions? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you. Healthcare discussion.
This one, unfortunately, I didn't get an email from BSI, and this is not BSI's fault until late yesterday. And I will forward that to you today. I did want to have a discussion about this because this is now the blue situation. I was a little bit in the loop, but I realized the other two we were not at this point. The other week I emailed Alan saying that we were having a meeting with Capital Blue on Monday to talk about working directly with them. And we had talked about this with the board, about talking directly with them, and quite frankly not going to Kilmer for the medical insurance discussions, given the issues that we had with Keystone last year. I was surprised when Monday occurred and two people showed up at the township office. I thought I was going to be talking with Capital Blue on the phone. I thought it was a phone meeting. So I didn't know it was going to be a person meeting, and I didn't know there was going to be two people showing up, not one. So I sat down with them, and Capital Blue brought BSI in. It's called BSI Corporate Benefits Around Valentine. When we had talked to Capital, and Liz and I talked with them, our discussion with them was that we relayed some issues we had. We hired about the plan, what happened last year where we got numbers and then the numbers changed. And it was no longer cost effective for us to do that, while went through all that stuff. And talked about how do we work with the union contract and the union contract issues. For Capital Blue, BSI is their union contract expert. That is the third-party vendor that has been most successful with Capital Blue about coming up with something that the clientele like, within the results in Capital Blue getting business. There's a agreement kind of there, but they recommend these guys. And so I was surprised to see BSI there, that was that was going to occur. So the Capital Blue contact made the introductions and then turned the meeting over to them. And so the rep from BSI, whose name escapes me right now, gave an overview for about an hour and a half on services they offer. We raised the issues and concerns that we had, because before we even do a healthcare work group, we know we can even do what we're saying, possibly suggesting. We're not going to, I feel like I lost a little credibility with what occurred last time, because I was told we could do it and then we couldn't do it. And then I wanted to make sure this time around some more ironclad assurances that we could actually do something first before we engage and move forward. BSI felt that we can. BSI also suggested that they have the ability to get us into Bendicon. And we explained, we went over our issues in the past, and then the guy didn't blink an eye on that. And he's basically, there's a consortium that utilizes up in Downtown area that utilizes Bendicon down here. And he explained how the approach he would use. We passed, I want to be careful with it, that's what I'm saying. We passed on some pertinent information that we knew of, which in the past was the roadblocks with Bendicon. He felt was doable, and extremely doable at this point. So he's got union background. He's worked with Bendicon. He's worked with consortiums. He's in good standing with Capital Blue. And I have not read his proposal yet, so all things said, I'm not sure what the numbers are yet. But from a qualification and perspective and what we need perspective, he was checked every one of the blocks of what we were looking for. He liked the idea of a healthcare working group. He thought that's a good way to get the union involved right from the start in the discussion versus management just making the dictate. And quite frankly, as I talk with him, as I see the union coming on board, is that they feel like they're part of the process where we start versus us dictating to them the terms. He's done it. I pointed out that we did in East Hempfield, and I said, here's the approach that we used. He thought that was a good approach. He felt pretty comfortable that he could do that, and he would be participating in our working group meetings, would explain, would be willing to have meetings with both the non-uniform and the uniform, explain what a health savings account is, how it applies, the benefits of it, and then how to do comparable or better clause that we have in the union contract. He has a process for addressing that too. And a way, because you cannot get truly apples to apples numbers. So you have to look at more of what the plan offers, and so they're comparable. I threw out my biggest concern was Liz, which was dealing with the copay issue. I said to him, number two, had a high deductible health care plan with HSA and had zero copay. I say copays are what kills us, because year to year the copay amounts change, and then that causes immediate grievance. That we get copay out of the equation, that makes Lizzie's job a lot easier, because all those special payments here or there for a specific copay go away. So he did blink an eye on that one too. He said enough of the right things to at least make me feel comfortable to have this conversation today with you from a credibility perspective, that I think that at least it'd be worthy for us to form the healthcare working group and to engage them. What I would like to do as the next step, because I did not know that this was going to occur on Monday, but I talked to Alan about this, would be to form the working group as well as have all three board supervisor members there and just have them do a presentation just like you did to us. We're not violating sunshine law, there's no deliberation, it's an informational session only. If the board feels comfortable with what they hear, then on our May 16th meeting, you can take action and implement his agreement at this point. But he said he checked the block. I was going to talk to Liz afterwards, and for both of us, he checked the block of every single thing that we were looking for, and all the past problems we had. We discussed the 30-day notice before January 1st, that we got to get any plan changes, and how we're going to get that stuff